The First World War ended in 1919. It had caused immense destruction and loss of life. The victorious Allied powers met at Versailles, France, to decide the terms of peace. The result was the Treaty of Versailles, a document that would have far-reaching consequences. The treaty aimed to punish Germany for its role in the war. However, its harsh terms created resentment and instability in Germany. The Treaty of Versailles held Germany solely responsible for the war. This caused outrage and bitterness among the German population. The treaty imposed heavy reparations on Germany, crippling its economy. Germany also lost significant territories, further fueling resentment and a desire for revenge. The treaty's stipulations created a fertile ground for extremist ideologies to take root. The Treaty of Versailles had a devastating impact on Germany. The reparations payments crippled the German economy. Hyperinflation spiraled out of control, wiping out the savings of the middle class. Unemployment soared, leading to widespread poverty and social unrest. The loss of territory and industrial regions further weakened Germany's economic prospects. Germans felt humiliated by the terms of the treaty. They resented the loss of national pride and the blame placed solely on them for the war. The political situation was chaotic, with numerous political parties vying for power. The Weimar Republic, Germany's new democratic government, struggled to maintain order and address the country's problems. This instability and discontent created an environment where extremist ideologies could flourish. Amidst the economic and political turmoil, a new political force emerged, the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or Nazi Party. Led by the charismatic but ruthless Adolf Hitler, the Nazis exploited the widespread anger and resentment in Germany. Hitler was a powerful orator who appealed to German nationalism and promised to restore Germany to its former glory. The Nazi ideology was based on racial purity and national superiority. They scapegoated Jews, communists, and other minority groups for Germany's problems. The Nazis promised to overturn the Treaty of Versailles, rebuild the German military, and create a new German empire. Through propaganda, intimidation, and violence, the Nazis gradually gained support and influence, taking advantage of the weaknesses of the Weimar Republic. Section 4. A League of Shadows. The failure of collective security. The League of Nations was created after World War I to prevent future wars. It was born out of the Treaty of Versailles, with the hope that it would foster a new era of peace and cooperation among nations. Its goal was to promote international cooperation and resolve disputes peacefully. The League aimed to provide a platform where countries could come together to discuss and resolve their differences without resorting to conflict. However, the League proved to be weak and ineffective. Despite its noble intentions, it struggled to assert its authority and often failed to take decisive action when it was most needed. It lacked a strong military force and the political will to enforce its decisions. Without the means to back up its resolutions, the League's pronouncements were often ignored by member states. Many powerful nations, including the United States, were not members. The absence of such key players further undermined the League's credibility and effectiveness on the global stage. The League failed to address the underlying causes of international tension. Economic instability, nationalistic fervor, and unresolved territorial disputes continued to fester, leading to further conflicts. It was unable to prevent the Japanese invasion of Manchuria in 1931. This blatant act of aggression highlighted the League's inability to maintain order and deter expansionist ambitions, or the Italian invasion of Abyssinia, now Ethiopia, in 1935. The League's failure to act decisively in these instances emboldened other nations to pursue their aggressive policies. The League's weakness emboldened aggressor nations like Germany, Italy, and Japan. These countries realized that their actions would go unchallenged, leading them to pursue their expansionist agendas with impunity. This lack of accountability and enforcement paved the way for the aggressive policies that ultimately led to the outbreak of World War II. The failure of the League of Nations to maintain peace was a significant factor contributing to the outbreak of World War II. Its inability to prevent aggression and resolve conflicts highlighted the limitations of collective security without the necessary power and commitment from its members. Section 5. Global instability, economic depression and rising nationalism. The 1930s witnessed a global economic depression. The Wall Street crash of 1929 had a devastating impact on the world economy. Countries around the world faced high unemployment, bank failures, and social unrest. The economic crisis exacerbated existing tensions and fueled the rise of extremist ideologies, including fascism and communism. The economic hardship led to a surge in nationalism and protectionism. Countries turned inwards, focusing on their own interests and abandoning international cooperation. Trade barriers were erected and international relations deteriorated. This atmosphere of mistrust and competition further increased the likelihood of conflict. Section 6. The road to war, appeasement and its limits. As Germany grew more aggressive under Hitler's leadership, Britain and France adopted a policy of appeasement. This policy was driven by the trauma of World War I, which had left deep scars on the European psyche. Leaders in Britain and France were desperate to avoid another devastating conflict. They hoped to avoid war by making concessions to Hitler, believing that he could be satisfied and contained. The idea was that by allowing Germany to reclaim certain territories, they could prevent a larger, more destructive war. However, appeasement only emboldened Hitler, who saw it as a sign of weakness. He interpreted the concessions as a green light to pursue his expansionist agenda without fear of retaliation. He continued to expand German territory, violating the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. The reoccupation of the Rhineland in 1936 was a bold move that went unchallenged by the Western powers. In 1938, Hitler annexed Austria in the Anschluss, a clear violation of the Treaty of Versailles. This move was met with little resistance, further encouraging his ambitions. Later that year, at the Munich conference, Britain and France agreed to Hitler's demands for the Sudetenland, a region of Czechoslovakia with a large German population. This agreement was seen as a triumph of diplomacy at the time. The appeasement of Hitler at Munich is now widely seen as a mistake. It failed to prevent war and instead gave Hitler the confidence to pursue further aggression. It only delayed the inevitable conflict and gave Hitler time to strengthen his military forces. The policy of appeasement ultimately proved to be a short-sighted strategy that underestimated Hitler's ambitions and the threat he posed to Europe and the world. Section 7. The spark ignites the invasion of Poland. On the 1st of September 1939, Germany invaded Poland, marking the beginning of World War II. This invasion was meticulously planned and executed with ruthless efficiency, showcasing the might of the German military machine. Hitler's invasion of Poland was the final act of aggression that Britain and France could not ignore. The world had already witnessed his annexation of Austria and the Sudetenland, but this was a step too far. They had guaranteed Poland's independence and realized that further appeasement would be futile. The policy of appeasement, which had been pursued in the hope of avoiding another devastating conflict, had clearly failed. On the 3rd of September 1939, Britain and France declared war on Germany. This marked the official start of a conflict that would engulf the world and last for 6 long years. The invasion of Poland was the culmination of a series of events and long-term factors that had been building for years. The Treaty of Versailles, which had imposed harsh penalties on Germany after World War I, the failure of the League of Nations, the global economic depression which had left many countries in turmoil, and the rise of nationalism all contributed to the outbreak of war. These factors created a volatile environment ripe for conflict. The world watched in horror as Europe descended once more into the abyss of war. The memories of the Great War were still fresh, and now a new and even more devastating conflict had begun.